You mentioned RFK, the guy you met. What do you think about some of the other candidates outside of Joe Biden in the Democratic Party, RFK Jr.? What do you think of him as a candidate?
I've met him. We once had dinner, and we have a number of friends in common,
Nice.
which is what makes this a little more awkward. But I think his campaign is basically sort of like a chaos candidacy to raise awareness and maybe raise money either for his book or his anti-vaccine organization, Children's Defense Fund, I believe it's called. I think there's some reporting that Steve Bannon really liked the idea of him running as a Democrat, again, to just generate chaos. Mm. I don't find it super interesting. I don't find it worthy of that much discussion. Smart guy, nice guy, has been doing anti-vaccine work that I don't find particularly inspiring.
So it's not just anti-COVID vaccine, it's more broader than that?
He's been in that space long before the COVID vaccines. Yeah, I don't find it super interesting.
Well, he also wrote the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. Is that the name of the book?
Did he write that? That's interesting. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. I'm aware of that book. I didn't know he wrote it.
I think I need, but it's been on my reading list to get. I've been trying to get a good balanced reading list about the COVID pandemic to understand what the hell happened. And anytime I start to try to go into that place, it's just I'm exhausted by it.
Well, it's interesting to me that you wouldn't wait longer before delving into those books to have maybe a more clear hindsight.
But I think this is a pretty good time. You don't think so? Like this is, it depends on your goals. If you're thinking of it as a historical event, yes, you should probably wait longer. But if you're thinking about like understanding what is broken about our system that we responded so poorly, that there was so much division, what is broken about our political system that it didn't unite us, it divided us, who's to blame? There's probably a lot of different narratives, but I feel like the more you learn about this, the better you can understand. I read, on just Vladimir Putin, I read like 5 biographies already, maybe more. Just it helps to really understand the people involved, the organizations involved. I don't know, everything from the scientists to the political leaders. It felt like the blog posts and the tweets didn't quite capture the story.
They didn't quite capture. No, one of the things I read a ton, I don't read any like modern political books. So I don't read the memoirs of elected officials. I don't read any, I just feel like I get enough of it in my job. So my reading list is just other things. It's history, it's narrative nonfiction, economics, etc. And that's my bias because I'm so overloaded with a lot of the stuff you're talking about. I haven't read any of Obama's books. I didn't read John Bolton's book, or I don't read any of that stuff. Although I'm sure there is value to be gleaned from it.
What about the other candidate that, according to the subreddit, and as you mentioned, you've criticized it a little bit, Marianne Williamson? Do you think, what are the pros and cons of her as a candidate?
This is another area where many in my audience really are angry with me.
Yeah.
I don't find her candidacy super interesting. I'll tell you the pros and the cons as I see them. I do think that we have elected officials in the US, particularly presidents, from a really narrow range of backgrounds. So it's lawyers and sometimes business people, very, very often lawyers. I think we would benefit from a much greater diversity of backgrounds. And I once said, and that would include people from education, people from the science world, people with backgrounds maybe running nonprofits, et cetera. Now, Marianne Williamson did, I guess, at one point run some kind of small nonprofit, and some in my audience thought that credential alone would make me fall head over heels in love with the idea of a Marianne candidacy. I've interviewed for her. It's just not for me, is the way I like to say it. It's the background of the woo-woo type stuff is a bit off-putting to me. I understand that someone with literal Christian Bible beliefs that also I don't like, maybe I'm more willing to accept, as most of our presidents, of course, have had those views because they're otherwise more qualified. But some of the things that she says just strike me as, I just don't know. I'll give you an example. When she was on with Russell Brand, she said there's no such thing as clinical depression. It just means someone in a clinic told you you have depression. I don't believe that to be the case. I think we have an understanding there's two types of depression. There's like a genetic predisposition depression. There's like a acute something's happening in my life, temporary depression. Okay, when she was asked about it recently, she said, I didn't mean it. I was just trying to impress Russell Brand. I don't know if I'm more bothered by the thing she first said or by the fact that she wanted to impress Russell Brand, but it's just like, it's just really not for me. And I agree with her on we need to take the climate more seriously. We need to expand access to health. I'm with all of that stuff. Now, I want to say one other thing about this. Anybody who wants to run should run. I am not suggesting there should be an uncontested primary for Joe Biden. Absolutely.
So you think it should be contested?
Well, what I mean by contested is, so there's two parts to what we mean by contested. Will the DNC organize debates? And we'll get to that in a second. But should anybody who's on the left get out of the way because Joe Biden is president and he's running for re-election? Absolutely not. The question about should there be debates, I would like there to be debates. The DNC pretty clearly isn't going to organize them. I think if you did them, you would have to say, at what polling level do you qualify? And I don't know exactly where you put that number, but I think it would be a great thing to put Joe Biden on a stage with, if you can get, 6%, 8%? I'm not really sure what the number would be. I'm totally all for that.
Why is this set of candidates, at least from my perspective, so weak? Do you have an understanding?
There's a lot of different answers to this. One aspect to this, which I think is more of a sociocultural thing, which I've recently read about to some degree, is the job actually turns off the people who would be best at it because of what you need to do to become president. And it includes all but completely abandoning your existing day-to-day life, job, which you may depend on, and family to some degree. It's horribly negative, as we already talked about. And at the end of all of that, you either lose and then have to rebuild, and maybe you're not in a position to be able to do that, or you win, and then now you've got 4 years of being one of the most hated people, no matter how good a job you do. So I think by its nature, it turns off a lot of people that would otherwise be good. I also think that there's a lot of posturing from within the parties about, well, you might be good, but it's not your time yet, so you should wait, and then let's talk about maybe a Senate seat here and there. So it's like a company essentially, and they're figuring out where they want to place people. I think all of these things make it so we end up with candidates most people aren't super thrilled with.
So it's difficult for somebody who's young or an outsider to quickly become a candidate.
I think that that's true, and I think also in a lot of ways it's just not. I mean, would you want to be president?
No.
I mean, I can't be because I wasn't born in the U.S., so it's easy for me to say. But
if everyone says no, then we'll get the people that we have.
No, I understand that.
So I would love to help somehow.
Sure.
And I feel like there's not even a mechanism for helping, except through through the voting process. But I'm just annoyed how little technology there is in the whole process, how little innovation there is in the whole process, all of this.
The sad thing is this is written about a lot, which is there's this thing called political hobbyism. And I think there's a good chance that some of the people in my audience are political hobbyists in the sense that they follow this stuff as entertainment to some degree. And I've written a lot about how, I've read a lot and talked a lot about how, okay, we vote every 2 years or every 4 years in our local elections, et cetera. And then we think about politics all the time. Neil Postman wrote about this in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death. But what are you actually going to do about the kids starving in this country and the nuclear buildup in that country? It's okay. If everybody refocused their attention on their immediate communities, and that could mean any number, it could mean the town or city you live in, or it might mean an athletic club or whatever. If everybody, this time they spent on political hobbyism, they moved somewhere else, which might put me out of a job. That's okay. I'm willing to lose my job because I think it would be so beneficial. Then our communities would just be that much better because you can actually affect change in a much more tangible way locally, whether it's obvious, people talk about potholes, but other things as well.
Yeah, and I wish our system was more amenable to that kind of contribution. Hopefully through the digital space it would be. Let me ask you about, on the Republican side, Ron DeSantis. What do you think of him as a candidate running against Donald Trump?
I think in the couple of weeks before our discussion today, his campaign, which hasn't even started, has sort of started to implode. And this was something that I started thinking about in September, October. He really doesn't seem ready for prime time, in the sense that just being confronted, and confronted's not even the right word, just being asked about some topics he didn't really seem to want to talk about, he responded in such a sort of disproportionate, unhinged way. During his recent trip to Asia, he was asked about why aren't you, or why are you responding, but in this weird way, to Trump's attacks on you? And he went into this weird bobblehead thing with a weird smile, and something came out that didn't make any sense. And he sort of got mad at the reporter. And it was just like, if you can't handle that, you can't be on a debate stage with Donald Trump. And again, for all my criticisms of Trump, the guy gets you on a debate stage, he can make you look pretty silly. He was recently asked about his role at Guantanamo Bay when he was an officer in, I forget which branch of the armed forces. And he just sort of attacked the journalist asking the question. And it just looked very bad. And there are increasingly big Republican donors who are not fans of Trump and were sort of hoping to put their eggs in the Ron DeSantis basket, who are saying, this guy just doesn't have what it takes. I don't think he can do it. So I don't know if DeSantis will be able to get away. Once you're polling 20-something like he is, and you haven't even announced, it's very attractive. And he probably to some degree is thinking, if I wait till 2028, I might not have this opportunity again. But Trump's polling 52, 53, which means even if DeSantis gets all of the current non-Trump vote, he has to figure out how to take something more from Trump. I just don't know how he does it.
First of all, the implosion aspect, that's part of the process, isn't it? You kind of implode a bunch of times.
And then rebuild yourself.
And rebuild, and because the news cycle kind of forgets.
It's possible. The problem is the first debate is in August. So that's only a few months away. And the decision is going to have to be made pretty soon. And unless he can get a new momentum going, I just don't know how he gets what he needs in order to really have a shot.
So would anyone else run against Donald Trump?
It's very tough right now. I mean, there are other people running. There's this guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's running. Nikki Haley is running. Her campaign basically dead on arrival. Trump actually does better in polls the more people run. When it's just him and DeSantis, that's the best scenario for DeSantis. It's not great for DeSantis, but it's certainly better. But I think the difficulty is, this is a question for Republicans to figure out. The people who rightly recognized in 2016 that this guy is not good for their party still believe this guy is not good for their party. But many of them recognize that most of the voters are still behind him. You can always say it's early, his polling doesn't really mean anything could happen. Something major would have to happen for Trump to lose that lead. If he got more, if he was arrested 2 more times and had more indictments, and it just became like, this guy can't even campaign because he's so busy going from court to court, maybe that would make a difference. It's really tough to imagine.